Appreciate it. It's good to be here in Portlandia, as some of us not from Portland call it. When I travel around the country, everywhere else, I look like a hipster. But this feels like second home to me because here I just look like somebody's dad, The stash, and everything doesn't really help. Another thing, yes, I have a lot of tattoos. And if you think I'm in sin, well, just know this, that they're all going to be washed away. They're all temporary. Because I'm going to have a resurrected body. Hello. But, man, it's been awesome being here today. Thanks, Billy. Can we give it up for Billy just putting this together? We need more events like this, more conferences like this, more conversations like this. The church is supposed to be a place that people can heal and experience the love of Jesus, the radical love and healing of Jesus. And Billy's just really leading the way, helping that happen here. So my name's Bennett. I'm a speaker with Josh McDowell Ministry and also an author. And I serve as the leader of the Resolution Movement, or the Resolution Movement, as some of us call it. It's all about resolutioning people with biblically based, research-informed answers to their hurts and struggles. So we talk about mental health, trauma, porn addiction, loneliness, body image, so many things that people are dealing with today. Yet, if you know anything about us as Christians and the church, a lot of times we haven't had the best solutions when it comes to this. We haven't even seen all these great solutions that actually exist in the Bible. And often we've tossed out solutions that are compatible with the Bible that we find in psychology and brain science. And so the Resolution Movement, it's a global movement. We've got people all around the world who are part of it, who are finding help. We create so many free resources on the Bible app, video series, on our website, social media content. So join the movement, resolutionmovement.org. But today's topic is near and dear to my heart, sexual wholeness in a pornified world. Because really what we're living in today is a pornified world. Porn has impacted so much of how we think, of how our views on sex have been shaped. It's become normalized. A recent study found that 49% of people, Christians, are okay with their porn use. They're like, yeah, I look at it, I dabble a little bit here and there, but not really an issue. So I want to get into that tonight and talk about some of the harms that we see in porn. I also want to talk briefly about God's design, because I think culture has been so loud about God's design, or not God's design, about culture's design, and yet God is the one who created our sexuality. He created us, and it was His idea. And where the church is silent, I'm convinced the enemy speaks. And that was a big part of my story. Growing up, I was surrounded by Christianity. My parents worked for a Christian organization, and my dad, where am I going with this? No. Growing up, surrounded by Christianity, my dad worked for a Christian organization. We talked about Jesus at home. And early on, I really understood the gospel message, that God loved me, that He wanted a relationship with me, but that I had done wrong things, and that separated me from God. But through Jesus, His life, His death, His resurrection, I was forgiven. I had a relationship with God. And that relationship was restored, but other relationships were broken, particularly in relationship with my dad. My dad, as he worked long hours at the office, as he traveled, I longed for him to be home. But when he was home, things often weren't much better. I experienced his emotional abuse through bullying, through manipulation, through being called names. I experienced his physical abuse. And on top of that, my mom didn't intervene. She didn't do anything about it. I was convinced that a stranger on the street who walked by and saw what was happening would have done more than my mom. On top of that, I was bullied by my friends growing up for my weight, for my faith, for how I looked. And so I say these things not to blame other people, but just to be real, that I was deeply hurting as a kid. I felt like there was something deeply wrong with me. Top of that, we didn't talk about sex in the church I grew up going to, but my friends did. And so I had this curiosity about that. I was like a sitting duck, prey or vulnerable for the enemy to prey on. So what did I do with all that pain that I was experiencing? Well, I started coping. I started getting really anxious, wondering, when's the next time I'm going to experience abuse? I started to get depressed and to turn inward and to feel like I truly was this failure. And when life seemed too much, suicidal thoughts entered in. But it wasn't enough. I was longing for something more. And that's when I discovered porn and masturbation. I still remember the first time I saw it. I didn't go looking for it. In fact, most people don't. It's either curiosity or they're introduced to it by someone. Because where the church is silent, the enemy speaks. And so my friends showed it to me, and I still remember the first time I saw it. I was shocked. I was disgusted as I saw these two people just using one another. I got up and left the room. But the curiosity and almost like this high that it brought me, the shock in the moment, brought me going back again and again and again. It captured me. It kept pulling me back as I tried and tried to push away. I didn't know how to get help. I didn't know why I kept going back to it. And I sure didn't know what it would cost. 12 years of my life. 12 years of an addiction, of countless promises to God to stop, praying, asking God to take this away from me. It didn't go away. And so, I don't know, coming in tonight, what your experience has been with sexual brokenness. Maybe you relate to parts of my story. Maybe you have struggled with some kind of unwanted sexual behavior. Maybe you don't really know what you think about sex, if God actually does even have anything good to say about it. Maybe your thoughts have been informed by culture. But I want you to know tonight, if you are struggling with some kind of unwanted sexual behavior, that you're not alone. And the stats show this. And also that if you're struggling with porn, it's not a male issue. It's not a female issue. It's a global everybody issue. According to Barna's recent Beyond the Porn Phenomenon study, 54% of practicing Christians view porn. 54%. That's men and women. And then 67% of pastors have a history of viewing porn. This is not a male issue. It's not a female issue. It's a global everybody issue. You know, maybe there's some confusion because of what you've grown up experiencing, what you've dabbled in, what has happened to you. Maybe there's confusion about what sex and sexual wholeness is supposed to be about. Maybe you don't agree with the historic sexual ethic that sex is designed for marriage, as we see in Genesis 2. Or maybe you don't think, just like those 49%, you don't really think there's anything wrong with porn or masturbation. Seems like everybody does it. But if I can share honestly with y'all, as somebody who's been helping people heal for 13 years from these things, I've seen so much damage from these things. Masturbation teaches us to be self-centered, to focus on our desires rather than to serve one another, to view people as objects of our own pleasure. And then much porn out there is actually sex trafficking on camera. 49% of sex trafficking victims state that porn has been made of them and released. 49%. People are creating it, uploading it, downloading it, uploading it, putting it all across the internet. There's not even a way that somebody could look at pornography today and know if it was created consensually or not, if that's sex trafficking or not. That's what's going on today. 88% of the videos out there depict aggressive and demeaning acts towards women. So porn may be free financially, but it's never free. There's always a cost to us as a consumer, to people creating it. Here's one more example. A similar image was shown earlier today. Let's see. Next slide. Oh, got to turn it on. Classic. Am I pointing this into the right place? There we go. First slide is a normal brain. Second slide is your brain on heroin. Third slide is your brain on porn. So this shows a lack of oxygen and blood flow to the higher reasoning parts of your brain, the frontal lobes. That's where that's where planning, executive functioning takes place. So, in one sentence, if you watch porn, you give up your brain. Because over time, you start making more and more impulsive decisions. We see this with addiction. I don't know why I did that. Or I don't know why I spent that much money. Or I don't know why, fill in the blank. This is what happens with addiction. This is what pornography does to our brains. And I want to say this too, because this often doesn't get talked about. Even if we talk about sex as Christians, a lot of times or sexual wholeness as Christians, a lot of times what gets left out is the calling of both marriage and singleness. Whether or not we get married and pursue sexual activity or are single for life, the Bible describes both marriage and singleness as equal ways of honoring God in this life. One's not better than the other, yet a lot of times we make marriage out to be better than singleness. But think about it this way. Jesus was single. Paul was single. Everyone in life will be single, whether that's for a lifetime or that's before marriage or after a spouse dies. It's not like some people are called to marriage, some people are called to singleness. We all experience singleness. Oftentimes, sex and marriage can become idolized in Christian circles, and it's unintentional, I think. But even when we say things like, when you get married, as opposed to if you get married, these good gifts of sex and marriage, they're not promised. I feel like the Apostle Paul was just in a righteous way, getting worked up. In 1 Corinthians 7:7, he said, "But I wish everyone were single, just as I am. Yet each person has a special gift from God, or one kind of another." Paul was like, man, I wish that you were single like me. And he's the Apostle Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament. He makes it clear that singleness and marriage are not more spiritual if you are married. Our primary purpose in life, whether we're single, whether we're married, is to love God and to love others. Both singleness and marriage, they each have these unique ways of making it easier or more difficult to fulfill that calling. So I want to real quick look at God's design, 4 things we see in Scripture, and then I want to spend most of our time looking at why do we struggle? Why do we get caught in unwanted sexual behavior? And so I'm going to go through these pretty quick. There we go. 4 reasons God designed sex. 1, procreation. 2, bonding. 3, pleasure. 4, reflect Christ in the church. Okay, done. No. First, procreation. Genesis 1:28. God blessed them. He said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on earth." A lot of times what we don't think about when it comes to this is that God was inviting them to procreate just like he had created, right? He had just created the earth, male, female, everything in the earth, and he invites them to take place in creation just like he created, and then to be his representatives. Like, you know, he's the boss, and we get to represent him. We're made in his likeness. We look like him. We have attributes that he has. Not all attributes, of course, but we're supposed to represent him, to rule, to reign, to steward the earth. Second is bonding. This was mentioned earlier today. But God first created Adam. He looked at the perfect world he made. He said there's one thing that's not good, and it's that Adam is alone. So he made Eve, equal in value to him. He needed somebody. He had God. He needed somebody. I think when we're going through stuff, when we're not going through stuff, we know this. We need somebody. Can I say it like this? We need more than Jesus, not for salvation, but God made us to need one another. We need other Christians. Bonding. Genesis 2:24, a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united to one. They're created to have this deep physical, emotional, spiritual connection with one another. What's wild is biologically, God even created things to be happening, oxytocin to be released, which bonds two people together. It was like he had this idea that they would be like two pieces of fabric sewn together, never to be separated. That's what sex was supposed to be about, that beauty, that goodness. Think about the world we live in and how over-sexualized it is. If you know the term body count and how people talk about body count and they've slept with this many people. God didn't intend that. They're leaving pieces. They're bonded to different people. If we look at pornography, we're bonding to a screen. God designed us to be bonded to one other person. Third, pleasure. Song of Solomon, I mean, if you've read it, you know what it's about, but it's a couple having this vibrant sex life on their honeymoon. Pleasure is spoken about in all kinds of different ways and metaphors, and you know, some people have said, oh no, it's actually about farming or something. They're talking about fruit and eating the fruit. And no, it's a metaphor. It's okay. God created it. He didn't have to make it pleasurable, but he did. He wanted us to experience that pleasure. Here's a huge problem in the church. Sex, if it's talked about, has been talked about in a male-centric way, where it's focused on the man. Or maybe men's times we'll talk about sex. If there has been any, what we call sexual discipleship at all, it's focused on men. What about all the women? What about their desire and how God created them to experience pleasure too? You want to know what the outflow of that is? The effect of that? According to a study of 20,000 Christian women done by author Sheila Gregory, I'm just going to go for it. Only 48% of Christian women reach orgasm during sex. What about the other 52%? Why has this become such a male-centric thing? Both men and women are created in the image of God, equal dignity and value. We can change that. Fourth, there's different views on this, but to reflect Christ and the church. Some people think just marriage is to represent Christ in the church. Some people think sex as well. But Ephesians 5:31-32, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. People have twisted this into all kinds of weird things. Like, I don't even repeat some of the things, but it just gets really weird. But what we can simply get is that sex and marriage is designed to be this holy and sacred bond between two people. Just like we are, in a different way, relationally deeply bonded to Christ, and one day will be for all eternity, and have a holy union with him. Let me just say this too. While sex is deeply meaningful, it's not ultimate. Man, I can just think about so many other things that are, well, one other thing that's more ultimate, that is ultimate, and that's Jesus. Jesus, it's ultimate. He's our king. He's the one we serve. He's the one we give our lives to. Sex is a good, beautiful gift, but here's the thing. It's not even necessary, like food, water, or shelter. Yet if you listen to the message around, it's like a fourth need that people have. Food, water, shelter, sex. No, it's not a need. It's a beautiful thing, but let's not make it a God thing. It's a good thing. It's not a God thing. Living into sexual wholeness, too, there's so much more about it than sex. It's about living a life that honors God with our eyes, with our mind, with our heart. With our eyes, are we objectifying others? Are we lusting after others? Jesus said something about that. With our mind, are we entertaining lustful thoughts or visualizing sex in our mind, which is essentially creating pornography in our mind? When I was so addicted to porn for 12 years, it started in my mind. I realized it would start in my thoughts and in my heart, but in my mind, I would give in to these things and create these things in my mind, and then it would just cause me to spiral, and eventually I'd go back to pornography. I realized in my recovery journey, I had to start defining that as a relapse. If I dwell on sexual thoughts and create pornography in my mind, that's a relapse for me. Because I knew where it would lead. With our hearts, are we seeking to honor God's design for sexual wholeness and pursuing growth and healing? Another thing too, are we blessing our sexual desire when it comes up, even if we don't have the ability to act on it in a healthy way? I've talked to so many singles throughout the years, like, and they're praying that God would take away all sexual desire. And I'm like, that's not the solution. God, would you just take this away? Or even if you're married, God, would you take this away? Would I never have sexual desire again? That's not the answer. God created this desire, but we can do something with that. We can learn a fruit of the Spirit, self-control. We don't have to act on everything that we feel. And we can sit with it. And I was talking to a single guy recently. He said, I'm learning to finally sit with my sexual desire. Whether I'm just there and lonely or I'm talking to a girl and he'll start to have sexual desire. And he's not thinking about the girl, but like, God, talking to God. I see what's happening here. God, thank you for this sexual desire that you have given me. And I choose to steward it and honor you with it. And now is not the right time to act on it. It's a beautiful thing, a great way to honor God with our sexual desire. Okay, so that was a lot of foundation. With that foundation, why do we struggle so much to live this out? Why do we struggle? Why do we get caught in addiction, porn addiction, unwanted sexual behavior, affairs, things that we don't want to do, or at one point we didn't want to do? I constantly get messages on social media where people are trying to stop their unwanted sexual behavior by praying more and, like I said, asking God to just take it away. Or maybe they're just like, man, I got to read the Bible more. I just got to try harder by willpower. Like white-knuckling it. But these methods fall short and they're not biblical, and I want to show you why. Because we got to look at what's really going on behind this. So here's the reality. Unwanted sexual behavior is ultimately about a spiritual battle that takes place in our minds. Unwanted sexual behavior is ultimately about a spiritual battle that takes place in our minds. Okay, everyone say mind on 3. 1, 2, 3. Mind. Yes. Let's talk about God's gift of our mind. Here's something that's so fascinating. 580 times the Bible mentions the words mind, think, believe, and variations of those words. And that's just one translation. And throughout so many of those mentions, there's this emphasis put on what we're supposed to do with our minds. You'll probably have some of these verses memorized. Colossians 3:2. Anybody know it? We're told to set our minds on things above. We're told to think about things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable in Philippians 4:8. And we're told to be transformed by the renewing of our mind in Romans 12:2. And we see the significance of the spiritual battle that we're up against in 2 Corinthians 10:3-5. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. I think one of the subtle battle plans of the enemy has for us to miss this. So often we think the spiritual battle we're in, we blame things like this. Oh man, I got a flat tire on the way to church. Or, I wanted to go to Chick-fil-A. Do you have Chick-fil-A out here? Chick-fil-A. I wanted to go to Chick-fil-A. Oh, it's Sunday. Satan, We just blame him for things like that, minor inconveniences. But what he has done is gotten us to believe so many lies. He's called the father of lies. That's what Jesus referenced it as. And he gets us to believe lies. And that's his number one tactic of spiritual warfare against us. Lies, even lies that we think are true. Let me get into that in a minute. So we're in this spiritual battle of our thoughts and our minds, a battle of demolishing mental strongholds. Why does the Bible talk so much about our minds, our thoughts? Well, our thoughts, our beliefs, the ways we think dictate what we do, our behaviors, our choices. I know there's some people in this room who don't really worry too much. You're like, I'll be able to pay my bills. I got a good retirement fund, or, I'm just happy-go-lucky. Everybody knows, that positive Polly in their life, or whatever you want to call them. That's not me. But those people, it's like they've got this deeply held core belief that God's going to show up. They're not really worried. They live day by day. They think and believe that God's going to meet their needs. They're going to trust him very easily. Less serious example, if you've been to school, probably most of us have, but you went to school knowing that, I'm going to graduate one day. And so you keep showing up to class, you keep doing your assignments, you keep studying for tests, because you have these experiences that happen. I studied for a test. I got a C, but C's get degrees. And so, yeah. And so I'm going to keep studying. It's like you think something, you act on it, it starts to cause you to believe it at a deeper level. You think something, you act on it, you believe it at a deeper level, even more and more. That's how our core beliefs are developed experientially. You're probably here tonight because you're thinking, man, this talk is going to help my life, And appreciate that. You're probably listening. See a few of you taking notes, but not many, so, no judgment, maybe just a little. Kidding. But here's the issue. Our core beliefs in life are developed. They don't just come out of nowhere. It's our experiences over and over again that lead us to having these deep core beliefs. And it causes this hardwiring in our brain. So practically, if you grew up feeling like an outcast, like, man, I don't fit in my family, I've been bullied, you might have this, and you have those experiences over and over again, you might believe that you're worthless, that you're not good enough. If you were treated differently because of the color of your skin or your economic standing, you may believe that there's something wrong with you. Or maybe consciously you don't believe that, but it keeps coming up. Something happens, and then you feel that way again. Somebody says something to you. So these lies that Satan wants us to believe get rooted deep down, and we start to live from them. And so many of us think they're true, especially as Christians. It's so easy to believe that we're just sinners saved by grace, as opposed to saints who are the righteousness of God, as opposed to new creations. Almost every single time the New Testament refers to Christians as saints. You're not who you used to be. So many people believe they're worthless sinners that God simply tolerates. Why? Because a parent treated them that way, or an older brother treated them that way. We have these experiences that lead to these beliefs we have, and a lot of times in Christian circles, what we hear or misinterpret, a lot of times we hear it from the pulpit, are things that affirm the lies the enemy wants us to believe that actually aren't biblical. So from these negative experiences in life, like being bullied, being treated poorly or less than, not feeling like we can measure up to people, we believe, I'm not good enough, something is wrong with me, I'm unlovable. And here's what happens. In present day, whenever we feel that way, when somebody does something, it's hurtful again, and it brings with it all the pain from the past. And then we want to do something with it. Ultimately, here's what happens. Our hurt and our unmet longings lead to unwanted sexual behaviors. Our hurt and unmet longings lead to unwanted sexual behavior. Somebody criticizes you. A significant other breaks up with you, cheats on you, does something, walks out. Once again, you failed at something. You're overwhelmed at work. You wonder how people are going to respond. And then you believe that same lie, that the enemy has so sought to sow into your soul. The lies creep in. We have hurt. We have these unmet longings, these desires that God created us to have, to be known, to be loved, to be accepted. And then we believe lies, and then we seek something out as a way to medicate our pain. You may have heard it said, sin is about meeting legitimate needs in illegitimate ways. It's easy to go to porn or to hook up with somebody to try to feel some kind of love, some acceptance, some kind of safety. Our hurt and our unmet longings lead to unwanted sexual behavior. We start going to something, and it's not just sexual. It could be social media, food. It could be drinking too much. It could be anger. It could be shutting down. Because we have past experiences of hurt, and it happens again, something that looks like it, smells like it, is like it, happens again, and it brings with it all the pain. We believe that lie again, and then we act on something that has worked in the past to try to keep ourselves safe. But why do we keep doing this? Because it feels like it works, but also because it changes our brain. If you were part of the sessions earlier today, this was talked about. These are brain neurons. We've got billions of them in our brain. And every time we're thinking thoughts, making decisions, the neurons in our brain are firing. There's a great book called The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge. And in that book, he says that the neurons that fire together wire together. The more and more you think the same thoughts, believe the same beliefs, make the same decisions, go to unwanted sexual behavior, it gets wired in to your brain. People have talked about this analogy where it's like, there's a lot of hiking, out here in Portland. We've got no hiking, in Dallas, except when you're stuck on the side of the road and you're hitchhiking, and it's not safe. Definitely not safe. I don't want to be the star of the next Netflix true crime series. What was I saying? Okay. Maybe you've seen a pathway, a trail through the woods or as you're out hiking. There used to be grass there before, there was trees and stuff, but over time you're like, wow, it's just dirt. You walk up and you're like, I guess that's the path, just a bunch of dirt. And what happens is people come up to that and they keep taking the same path, and grass is no longer growing. Same thing happens in our brain physically. There's grooves in our brain that show we've taken the same path again and again. It's kind of like muscle memory. So if you grew up throwing the football and learned how to, the first time you're throwing that football, it's like super wonky and flying through the air, but eventually you get that nice spiral and you don't have to focus so hard, and then you can throw the football and talk to your friends or your dad or whatever. Muscle memory. Those grooves are being formed in our brains. It happens in the positive. God designed it to be that way. But it also happens in the negative. We experience the hurt. We believe the lie. We go back to that same behavior. And it creates those same grooves in our brain. If you were here earlier, we talked a little bit about neuroplasticity, that we don't have to stay stuck. This is the good news. Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. What's the pattern of this world? Lies, pain, hurt, sin, addiction. But we can be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Neuroplasticity says the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. Your brain is moldable, it can change. It's like maybe you've hiked those pathways so many different times, seen people hike those pathways. They put a chain link fence around a hiking area. Grass starts to grow over it. What was there before is no longer there anymore. And that's what God does to our brains as we take daily steps, one thought at a time. He renews our mind. Neuroplasticity. Dr. Caroline Leaf, in her book, Switch on Your Brain, says, as we think, we change the physical nature of our brain. As we consciously direct our thinking, we can wire out toxic patterns of thinking and replace them with healthy thoughts. And then Norman Doidge, same book, The Brain That Changes Itself, says the neurons that fire apart wire apart. This is good news. The lies can go away. The behaviors can be overcome. Christians for years have called this sanctification. And God changes us as we trust Him, as we become vulnerable, as we share and figure out why we do what we don't want to do. Here's a summary of how that happens in our brain. Can we advance to the next slide? It's not going. It's a video. I'll show it in a minute. But this, in my life, is what I've continued to experience over and over again. And at times, it's felt like it's taken years. In some sense, it has taken years. Step after step, meeting after meeting, therapy visit after therapy visit, a lifestyle change for life. Okay, we'll show the video. Is the sound working? Okay, oh good. No, I'm not gonna. I was thinking about doing a play-by-play of the video, but she's got an Australian accent that's way better than mine that I can't impersonate very well. Plus, that might be offensive. So, anyways, over time, our decisions, our thoughts, our behaviors change what we experience, change the way we see life. Y'all are so distracted. Okay. There we go. At the beginning, I shared how I experienced so much sexual brokenness. In fact, I remember the first time I took a sexual addiction screening test. I scored an 18 out of 20 on the test. I was almost as addicted as you could have gotten to pornography. I never could have seen my life without it. I never wanted to see my life without it. It was like this thing that I couldn't imagine life without. But I didn't stay there. As I began meeting with a certified sex addiction therapist, as I began having a group of guys every single day who supported me, I started figuring out why I did what I didn't want to do. I was able to put the pieces together on my life growing up, why I believed the lies that I did, how they were coming up in the future, and how that led me to pornography. I started challenging those lies. I started reaching out for help rather than acting out. While pornography is an unhealthy coping mechanism, connecting with someone and being vulnerable is a healthy coping mechanism. And did you know that in both, your brain releases dopamine and oxytocin? God created us to heal and to get the same thing, but in a healthy way. Further, when we go to connection and share with someone what we're struggling with rather than going to pornography, and it's a safe person, we feel seen, we feel known, we feel accepted, we feel loved, and that is so much more satisfying. In fact, for me, it was almost addictive. I kept doing that over and over and over and over and over again. And today, I've been free from pornography and masturbation for 11 years. And that's what God can do and wants to do in our lives. He wants to set us free, not just for a day, not just for a week, not just for a month. Yes, relapses may happen, but He can. He can lead us to experience lasting freedom. Here's another summary, non-video form. Whoops. There we go. Here, in case you fell asleep during this talk, I know it's been a long day. I'm just glad that you're here. Next time, bring a mattress, and maybe through osmosis it will get into you. But here's how it happens. Brokenness. This is the cycle of brokenness. We see this in the Bible. Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart, everything you do flows from it. What happens when your heart has been hurt, when you have unmet longings? What happens when the father of lies comes in? With the trauma, with the hurt, with not being accepted, with being bullied, with never feeling like you could please your dad or your mom, and you believe that you're less than. And then the tempter comes in, and you have unhealthy coping mechanisms, and then you develop a fixed brain pathway, and you're conformed to the pattern of this world. It happens to all of us. But what happens when the healer comes in? And when we're hurt, we connect with people. When we tell ourselves the truth, when we take our thoughts captive, when we think about things that are true, noble, right, and pure, and lovely, and admirable. And we have healthy coping mechanisms. And we hash it out with God. I love the Psalms. Just David just hashing it out with God, I don't know why that was so funny to me. But he's honest, he's raw, he's connecting, he's being seen, known, and loved by God. What if we could do that with one another? And over time, we're transformed by the renewing of our mind. We have a rewired brain. A little bit deeper. I want to invite you to take the next step in your journey. Take a picture if this helps you. Identify the what. What hurt and lies lead you to unwanted sexual behaviors? It's not random. Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Instead of simply condemning our struggles, we need to question our struggles. What's going on in my heart? What hurt have I experienced? What lies am I believing? And how am I seeking to cope with that and try to get what I think I need through unwanted sexual behavior? Is it rejection rather than acceptance? You know, there's this whole field of study called the sex addiction therapy. 30, 40 years ago, they coined the term the arousal template. Nothing that people are dabbling in, struggling with, is random. It's deeply tied to their story. An example, one of my friends, Jay Stringer, wrote a book called Unwanted, and it explores this theme all throughout it. But here's an example. Women who grow up with angry fathers can find themselves, because it's not a one-size-fits-all or, hard and fast line, but can find themselves pursuing pornography where there's sexual aggression in it. Why? Because here's what we do. We eroticize our wounds. If you learn that love, the only love you got was to experience aggression from a man, how does the enemy sexualize that in somebody's life? It makes total sense. And yet, a lot of times what we do as Christians, we say, oh, that's evil. How could you look at that? And we never question it. We never say, what is this actually about? Proverbs 4:23. Everything you do flows from your heart. What has happened to it? And so if we start questioning these things, getting curious about it, we're going to get 100 times further than just praying that it will go away. Granted, I've seen God deliver people in an instant from things, and he does do that. And I pray for it, for myself all the time for certain things. Like, God, would you deliver me instantly? You've never done it, and I've had to do a lot of therapy. And I know it's you working through the therapist and whatever. But that's the way he's delivered me. But I still believe he can. But let's get curious. If you're feeling unsafe, if you're feeling a lack of appreciation, if you're believing you're a reject, or you're a failure, that you're unlovable, you got to identify what even the battle is in your life, because it's not about the behavior, it's about the heart. Jesus taught us that. He kept saying, you've heard it said, but I tell you this. He always took it to the heart level. Number 2, identify the why. Why is that so significant for you? Anybody ever said to a friend, a sibling, a spouse, you're overreacting? Never say that when somebody's overreacting. It doesn't go well. But normally that happens because with it in the moment, it brings so many past experiences that were painful. That's what's happening here. Why, if you're struggling with rejections, why is that so significant to me? What negative experiences from the past? What lies did you start believing? Did you develop a cycle of hurt, lies, and unwanted sexual behaviors? 3, identify the truth, because we have to take our thoughts captive. I'm not sure how many lies the enemy tells us when we do such a good job of telling them to ourselves. Like over and over again, I'm a failure, I'm worthless, I suck, I'm unlovable. That's not what God says about us. That's not what you'll read in the New Testament. I love 1 John 3:1. See what kind of love the Father has given to us that we should be called children of God. And so we are. And number 4, fulfill the longing. If you're experiencing rejection, sit with God and experience his acceptance and his love that washes over you. Reach out to a safe person. Share with them what you're experiencing. Experience the affirmation of your feelings. Get equipped with a specialized resource and with tools. This is a book I wrote, Free to Thrive. It explores everything we talked about tonight. But I've only shared about 5% of the things that I've researched and learned on this topic. And you can find the other 95%, give or take a few decimals, in the book. And we have them out there. And then lastly, join the Resolution Movement. If you want free resources for yourself, if you want to learn how to put this into practice, how biblical truth, brain science, psychology all works cohesively, if you want to learn more about overcoming trauma, dealing with mental health, loneliness, we have a private online community, we have social media channels, email series, video series, all kinds of things, and as much as possible we give away for free. We have promo or cards out there that have links to free resources. Join the movement. I want to say, I'm almost done. I want to say next in the breakout session, we're going to go even deeper on this. We're going to be talking about these 7 core longings or 7 relational needs that every human being has. And we need those things fulfilled. God, we see them all throughout the Bible. I'll talk about the biblical references for it. We need those fulfilled in our life. We were designed to have them fulfilled in the Garden of Eden. But we live outside the Garden of Eden, and those go unmet. We experience trauma, abuse, all kinds of things, and deficits. And we do something with those deficits. So the way we get out of it is we start to find those 7 things fulfilled again. Because we have negative experiences that hurt us, but when we have these positive experiences, God uses them to heal us. So we'll be talking about that. And just know this. Whatever you've experienced, whatever's been done to you, whatever you have done, it's not beyond the healing power of our God. You know, if he can do it for me, if he can do it for thousands of people that I know, he can do it for you or the people in your life that you care about. He designed us, he created us, he's holding us together moment by moment, and he loves us so much, and he is for our flourishing and for our healing. In fact, he cares more about it in your life than even you do. It's amazing. Amen?
Yep. Thanks, Ben. All stuff we need to hear. All right. Who's ready for some drinks? All right. So again, outside, happy hour. Elena is going to be playing for us for the next 45 minutes. And we can be back in here at 8:30 for a little 25, 30-minute Q&A. Breakout with a Q&A if anyone does have questions. And then again, as a reminder, we will have hand washing tonight. And the baptismal tank is full. Again, the last couple nights, I've just been sharing that if you want to rededicate your life, if you're hearing things that you haven't heard before that are just really resonating with you, and you feel like this is something you want to share, it'll be very private. We'll have music playing, and there won't be any speaking. It'll just be a baptism and just rededicating our lives. So let's head out for happy hour, and we'll be back in here at 8:30.